Porsche used to be untouchable. The 911 didn't just compete, it defined the sports car for 6 decades. The Cayenne made a luxury SUV feel like it belonged on a track. The Taycan was supposed to prove that going electric didn't mean going soft. That was the story. Here's what's actually happening. A Chinese smartphone company is breaking Porsche's lap records. Sales in China have fallen off a cliff. Thousands of employees are getting cut. The entire executive team has been swapped out. And the electric strategy Porsche built its future around? Gone. Quietly walked away from. The brand that set the standard for every performance car on the road is now scrambling to figure out what it even is, and almost nobody's talking about it. Where Porsche went wrong starts with the car that was supposed to carry the brand into the next era, the Taycan. Early on, the Taycan looked like a masterstroke. Over 41,000 units shipped in 2021, a number that actually eclipsed 911 sales across Europe that same year. A 4-door electric sedan from Stuttgart outselling the 911 felt like vindication, like proof that Porsche could own the electric era without giving up its identity. That confidence didn't hold. Taycan deliveries cratered 49% in 2024, dropping to just 20,836, and the first quarter alone registered a 54% decline compared to the year before. Roughly 16,000 units moved in 2025, dragging the car further into irrelevance. One automotive publication attached the word disaster to it, and once that label sticks to your flagship electric car, you've got a problem that marketing can't fix. Deeper issues fed the decline. Owners discovered their Taycans shedding 40% or more of their value within 2 years, turning the car into one of the worst depreciating vehicles in the luxury segment. A 2024 charging-related recall capped some Taycans at 80% state of charge until a software fix rolled out in 2025, which did nothing to reassure buyers already wavering. Chinese customers, already straining under a price tag approaching 2 million yuan, which is around $295,000, found competitors offering equal or better performance at drastically lower cost. Porsche's reaction to all of this reveals just how deep the damage goes. 80% all-electric deliveries by 2030 had been the public commitment, the number the entire forward strategy rested on. By 2025, Porsche abandoned it outright. All-electric replacements for the 718 Boxster and Cayman got shelved with no new date. The electric Cayenne got pushed back, and combustion and plug-in hybrid life cycles received extensions. Fresh investment in a new V8 hybrid engine even got the green light. 3 years after telling the world it was going fully electric, the company now described the transition as slower than planned. Porsche didn't just commit to electric cars, they committed to building their own battery cells, and that bet fell apart alongside everything else. A joint venture called Cellforce Group kicked off in 2021 with a company named Custom Cells, based in Tübingen, Germany. The pitch sounded strong on paper: develop and manufacture high-performance cells in-house, giving Porsche control over the most expensive component in any electric vehicle, and use that edge to separate the Taycan and future EVs from cheaper rivals. None of it materialized. Cellforce effectively collapsed by 2024, and what followed in 2025 was a €700 million write-down on battery activities, an admission of how badly the plan misfired. Porsche clawed back a piece of the wreckage by acquiring a 76% stake in V4 Smart during March 2025, a deal that absorbed parts of Varta AG's operations. The original vision of Porsche-built cells powering Porsche-built cars, though, died without ceremony. That battery write-down landed alongside a much larger pile of pain. Shelved electric vehicle platforms, restructuring costs, and the battery charges together totaled €3.9 billion in extraordinary hits during 2025. Operating profit for the year plunged 92.7%, from roughly €7.3 billion down to just $413 million, and operating margin compressed from around 18% to 1.1%. Those aren't luxury car numbers. Those are the margins of a budget brand. 7.35 billion euros in net liquidity means bankruptcy sits nowhere near this conversation. The speed of the financial slide, though, shows exactly how badly the EV strategy misfired. While the electric strategy unraveled at home, the market that was supposed to fuel Porsche's growth caved in underneath it. 95,671 vehicles left Porsche showrooms in China during 2021, making it the single largest market in the world for the brand. No other country came close. And then 4 straight years of contraction cut that number by more than half. Deliveries slipped to 93,000 in 2022, dropped to 79,000 in 2023 for a 15% decline. Cratered 28% in 2024 to 56,887 and landed at 41,938 in 2025, a 26% plunge that pushed Porsche below 50,000 Chinese deliveries for the first time since the early expansion years. First quarter 2025 painted an even uglier picture, with Chinese sales falling roughly 42% year over year. A quarterly drop that's steep isn't a rough patch. A drop that's steep means the market is walking away from you. Competition drove much of the exodus. Chinese automakers moved directly into Porsche's price territory, with cars matching or exceeding its technology and performance. BYD, now the world's largest electric vehicle manufacturer by volume, launched its Yangwang luxury division and the U9 supercar program targeting Porsche's exact customer base. NIO, Li Auto, Zeekr, and the Huawei-backed Aito Wenjie brand all chase the same buyer who 5 years ago would have walked into a Porsche dealership without glancing at alternatives. Porsche's own actions confirmed the retreat. Plans to slash the Chinese dealer network from 144 outlets to roughly 100 by 2027 tell you everything. Nobody closes a third of their showrooms in a market they expect to bounce back. For anyone who has followed Porsche for decades, this part of the story might be the hardest to accept. Xiaomi, a Chinese company known almost entirely for smartphones, launched a car called the SU7 Ultra in February 2025, carrying 1,548 horsepower. A 0 to 100 km per hour time under 2 seconds, a top speed of 350 km per hour, and the ability to reach 80% charge in 11 minutes. Xiaomi stamped a price of 529,900 yuan on it, roughly $73,000, while the Porsche Taycan Turbo GT carries a Chinese sticker near 2 million yuan, almost 4 times more for a car producing less power. And then came the Nürburgring moment. On April 1, 2025, that same SU7 Ultra posted a certified Nordschleife production car lap of 7 minutes and 4.957 seconds, beating the Taycan Turbo GT's existing record at the track Porsche has treated as its personal proving ground for decades. Losing that benchmark to a phone company landed differently than losing it to Ferrari or McLaren would have. That one hurt. Porsche answered on May 7, 2026, when a Taycan Turbo GT wearing a Weissach package and Manthey racing kit turned a 6-minute 55-second lap and reclaimed the top spot. They got the record back, but needed the full engineering arsenal and a dedicated race preparation package to beat a car from a company that wasn't building automobiles 5 years earlier. Xiaomi CEO Lei Jun spelled out his ambition without pretense, stating his goal was to deliver, quote, "the performance of a Porsche, the technology of a Tesla, and the luxury of Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and Audi." Before the Nürburgring, that sounded like empty talk from a tech company. After the Nürburgring, nobody dismissed it. A European performance brand thrived during the exact same period Porsche struggled, and that brand is Ferrari, which makes the comparison almost cruel. Roughly 13,750 cars rolled out of Ferrari's gates in 2024, compared to 279,000 from Porsche in 2025. Porsche moves 20 times the volume. Ferrari's market value still sits at roughly double, around 75 billion euros against Porsche's 37 to 41 billion, which brings up the number that really stings. Per car sold, Ferrari's valuation works out to approximately 5.5 million euros, while Porsche's lands at around 130,000. Wall Street assigns more than 40 times the value to each Ferrari that it assigns to each Porsche. An operating margin near 27% and an order book stretching into 2027 keep Ferrari in a different universe from Porsche's 1.1% return on sales in 2025 and its reduced production guidance. CEO Benedetto Vigna captured the gap in 5 words: "We are a luxury company that is also doing cars." That sentence used to describe Porsche too, but a company pushing close to 300,000 vehicles a year with volume manufacturer margins forfeited the right to claim it. European equity researcher Pierre-Olivier Essig framed it directly: chasing volumes while almost bankrupt in 2002 was the right strategy for Porsche when their first SUV launched. But today, just the 911 remains competitive. Ferrari's lesson comes down to something straightforward. Exclusivity protects margins, volume erodes them, and Porsche picked volume. By early 2025, the pressure bearing down on Porsche's leadership had grown impossible to contain. Oliver Blume took over as Porsche CEO in 2015, then added a second title as CEO of the entire Volkswagen Group during September 2022, replacing Herbert Diess. Running both companies at once drew sustained criticism from investors and analysts, who questioned whether a single person could give Porsche the focused attention it needed while also steering Europe's largest automaker. Blume called the dual arrangement deliberately chosen, while admitting it was not intended to last forever. February 2025 brought the reckoning. 1,900 German job cuts by 2029 landed on top of 2,000 positions already eliminated through non-renewed contracts. CFO Lutz Meschke, Porsche's financial architect since 2009, lost his seat that same month, and sales chief Detlev von Platen, the brand's longtime public face, went with him. The executive board shrank from 8 members to 7 in what became the most extensive management turnover in Porsche's modern history. German media broke the news in August 2025 that Blume himself would step aside from Porsche, and October 17th brought the official confirmation. Michael Leiters would take over starting January 1st, 2026. Leiters carried a resume built for exactly this crisis. 54 years old with a PhD in mechanical engineering, he spent 2000 to 2013 at Porsche itself, including a stint as assistant to legendary turnaround CEO Wendelin Wiedeking, the man who saved the company from near bankruptcy in the 1990s. 8 years at Ferrari as chief technology officer followed, where he oversaw cars like the SF90 Stradale and the hybrid programs that kept Ferrari profitable through the EV transition. Running McLaren Automotive as CEO came after that. Leiters arriving at Porsche signals a deliberate return to the engineering-first, sports car-first thinking that built the brand's reputation before the volume push and the EV pivot muddied everything. Layered on top of the strategic missteps and the China collapse sat a structural vulnerability Porsche's German competitors had largely sidestepped. BMW builds vehicles in Spartanburg, South Carolina, and Mercedes assembles them in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Porsche builds nothing in the United States. Every single car sold in what has become its largest market crosses the Atlantic from German factories, which meant the 25% tariff on imported automobiles imposed in April 2025, followed by parts tariffs in May, landed on Porsche without any domestic production to absorb the blow. 700 million euros. That was the total tariff cost to Porsche in 2025. The broader Volkswagen Group swallowed roughly €4 billion in tariff charges that same year. An August 2025 deal between the EU and the US brought the rate down to 15%, but the numbers had already registered the damage. 3 rounds of US price increases across 18 months followed, and new CEO leaders acknowledged that American production remains, quote, compelling but complex, a phrase that in practice means no US factory before 2028 or 2029 at the earliest. For a company already reeling from collapsing China sales and a failed electric strategy, absorbing €700 million in tariffs during the same 12 months looked less like bad luck and more like a failure to prepare. Porsche sits in serious trouble, but the story isn't finished, because the brand still holds cards most competitors would trade almost anything for. 52,208 911s shipped in 2025, a 3% increase that keeps the car supply constrained, profitable, and completely untouched by the EV turmoil surrounding everything else in the lineup. 6 decades in, and the 911 remains the benchmark, and its buyers aren't cross-shopping with Xiaomi. What nobody expected from the all-electric Macan turned out to be the year's bright spot. Nearly 41,000 units sold in its first full year made it Porsche's best-selling model for 2025, and Porsche North America CEO Timo Resch noted that many of those buyers came from outside the brand entirely, meaning the electric Macan brings in new customers, rather than stealing them from existing Porsche owners. Record deliveries across North America during 2025, with 5% growth through the first 9 months, confirmed the brand still carries aspirational weight in the American market despite repeated price hikes. The balance sheet holds too. €7.35 billion in net liquidity keeps Porsche far from financial distress, and company guidance for 2026 targets a return on sales between 5.5% and 7.5%, well above mainstream car companies even if it sits far below the 18% posted in 2023. Porsche also put money into e-fuels through the HIF Global plant in Chile, a bet that could keep combustion 911s viable past 2035 if synthetic fuels reach commercial scale. Here is where Porsche stands right now. Its biggest overseas market has been slashed in half over 4 years. The Taycan went from outselling the 911 in Europe to carrying the word disaster next to its name. The battery venture collapsed. The 80% electric target got scrapped. 3 top executives departed within months of each other. A smartphone company broke its Nürburgring record, and €700 million in tariffs hit during the worst year imaginable. Against all of that, the 911 keeps moving. The Macan Electric found an audience nobody predicted, and a new CEO with Porsche, Ferrari, and McLaren on his resume took the wheel in January 2026. Porsche will survive, and that part isn't really in question. What's in question is whether this remains the same company. The Porsche that car enthusiasts grew up admiring ran on engineering superiority, exclusivity, and the conviction that every car wearing that badge had to be the best version of itself. Right now, Porsche pushes close to 300,000 vehicles a year, with margins resembling a volume manufacturer, competes against Chinese brands that barely existed 5 years ago, and wrestles with whether its future belongs to batteries, gasoline, or some combination of both. The brand that once set the standard now chases it. That's the story nobody is paying attention to. Not whether Porsche can keep the lights on, but whether the Porsche we grew up with already disappeared while we weren't looking. Thanks for watching.